Bishop Shannon, I would turn things over to you. I know the congregational clock in Middlebury has rung 6 o'clock, and it seems that we have arrived at the appointed hour.
Great, thank you, Paul. So I'm going to, I'm going to begin our meeting with something from our diocesan devotional, Baptized for Abundance. O fountain of living waters, let us fill us with your living water. Those who drink of the water that I will give them will never be thirsty. The water that I will give will become in them a spring of water gushing up to eternal life. Let us pray. Almighty and ever-living God, source of all wisdom and understanding, be present with those who take counsel in the Diocese of Vermont for the renewal and mission of your church. Teach us in all things to seek first your honor and glory. Guide us to perceive what is right, and grant us both the courage to pursue it and the grace to accomplish it. Through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.
Welcome, everyone. It's good to see you all this evening for this pre-convention meeting. This is our opportunity to preview all of the business that will be on hand at this year's 190th convention of the Diocese of Vermont. And it'll be an opportunity to ask questions and find out more about everything that you will need to know to be fully engaged in the work ahead of us. I hope that you will be able to participate in the events in person at the Cathedral on Saturday. Registration begins there, just as a reminder, at 9 a.m. And our programmatic part of the day, interspersed with worship, will start at 10. And the business session, which will be held on Zoom, is scheduled for 6 p.m. on Thursday, the 9th of November. So I hope you'll be mindful of all of those days and times and fully participate to the greatest extent possible in this convention season. I want to turn things over, if I could, to Kathleen Moore, who will give us a little bit more instruction on Zoom and its use for us this evening.
Good evening, everyone. It is so good to see you in your little squares yet again. I have seen the list, and many of you, but not all of you, are just total pros at this and have now done it several times since 2020. But I just wanted, for the benefit of sort of practicing things that may be a year old or maybe brand new, to go over a couple basic Zoom things. The one important Zoom function is mute and unmute. And so I think y'all are doing really well. Everyone seems muted now. Do remember that if you want to say something, hopefully you will raise your hand, which we're about to go over. And you will be recognized to do so, and then you will have to press the button to unmute yourself. Also, very important for this evening and for convention is what's called the Zoom raised hand function. So we cannot scan every time and see this. This is not raising your hand, at least in this context. So what you need to do is find on your app, whether you're on a desktop or an iPad or whatever you are using, find the raise hand function. And if we want to practice that right now, we can do that. So if folks, yes, thank you. Like I said, y'all are all set. And then the next thing to know, yay, woohoo, very exciting. Thank you. And then the next thing you will probably remember is that if you want to put your hand down, because, oh my gosh, I raised it by mistake, you press the same button again. That was perfect. And that is all from me about Zoom orientation this year. Thank you so much.
We will fortunately have the guidance of Kathleen when it comes to the business session, where there'll be a little more technological challenge involved. But tonight, that should suffice for our work together this evening. like it is the case at every diocesan convention, we always adopt a set of rules of order for the work that we come together to do. And tonight I would like to ask our Chancellor, Tom Little, to introduce the rules of order that'll be governing our proceedings at the business session on the 9th.
Thank you, Paul. Be happy to do so. We are proposing to use the same rules of order that we have used for a really long time, in large part because they have worked well. They have allowed convention to function well, for everyone to get a chance to be heard. And we have amended them or supplemented them over the last few conventions to deal with the remote participation realities. And that seemed to work well. We haven't had any rule-related problems, Paul, over the last couple of years. In addition to the rules of order, there comes a time early in the business session when I make some remarks about parliamentary procedure and keeping it accessible and pretty simple. And it's that when I will ask the bishop to ask if there's any objection if we limit the time for debate on any one matter, any one question, to 20 minutes overall, and for a 2-minute limit on each person who rises to speak, with the proviso that everyone who hasn't yet spoken be given an opportunity to do so before anyone speaks twice. That has been how we've handled that. Of course, rules of order and things done by unanimous consent can be changed during the course of convention if someone wants to rise or raise their hand and ask for a rule suspension. And it's helpful when someone asks for a rule suspension if they say what they, exactly what result they want to achieve. It may be, I want to suspend the rules to extend debate for 10 more minutes, for example. That is a 2/3 vote. And we do that from time to time. But we've kept the rules of order succinct and slim. They work well. And I should add, Paul, that maybe the most important thing in terms of rules of order and how we treat each other at convention is to be attentive, to listen, and to be thoughtful about what we say and what we do, as always.
Yes.
So I'll stop there, Paul.
Thank you. I wonder if anyone has questions or comments. You will see in the chat box that a link to the rules of order has been provided. Are there any questions or concerns about the rules of order as they're being presented? Not seeing or hearing any questions coming forward. It's so great. Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
I'd like to ask next to get a sense of our financial well-being from our interim CFO, Michael Shapiro, who will provide us with some information on diocesan budget and finance.
Thank you, Paul. I will talk through the diocesan budget for 2024. Can we move to the next slide? This slide was motivated by last year's budget discussion, and it's a good starting point. A budget is often in the form of a profit and loss statement, which measures performance over a period of time, whereas a balance sheet is a snapshot of health at one point in time. And when we think about the health of the diocese, there's no debt, there's decent investment balances. There's committed staff, trustees, others, evidenced by how many are on this call. One of my other favorite metrics for health is looking at a cash reserve of an organization. And it's tricky here at the diocese because of the amount of restricted cash. But what it measures is if all income were to stop today, how many months could an organization pay its current expenses? You assume that expenses would continue as is. And this diocese has a 6+ month cash reserve, which is decent. We are, like many organizations, we have challenges for the future, but we're in a pretty decent place today. If I'm using terminology that I've heard from our recent history, I would agree with those that use the term fiscal hill, not fiscal cliff. And a fiscal hill is a pretty common place to be. There is some balance sheet work left to do. By the end of this calendar year, we will be, as a diocese, we will be all caught up on audits. And one of the reasons that's a big deal is that we rely on our auditors today to book all of our investment activity. And I don't want to get into those weeds, but we're going to change that. We're going to book our own activity beginning in 2023, but we need to wait for the auditors to wrap up 2022. But starting on 1/1/24, our balance sheet will show real-time balances. Each quarter we'll be booking that activity. And so we'll be able to, it'll be I think a milestone for us to reach that point. Next slide, please. One of the biggest jumps in this budget over 2023 is in the formation and mission line. The budget last year was about a third of what it is this year. And so we laid out here some of the areas that are the focus for 2024. I'll highlight that last line that includes other formation and mission support. That includes continuation of the Green Mountain Online Abbey, which I don't know how the diocese ultimately measures success. I think sometimes in maybe flawed, simpler terms, but it is when you look at the turnout for the Abbey and the cost of the Abbey, it has been a rousing success. I loved it when Adjoa recently requested her dedicated Zoom license for the Abbey and referred to it as her operating budget. I enjoyed that. The other thing I did for this budget, and it was a solo act, but I think it's a good exercise, is to think about what we're doing in terms of program versus admin. And it's common at a nonprofit. Actually, it's often required at a nonprofit to measure all of your expenses in 3 buckets: program, admin, and fundraising. Fundraising isn't really one of our buckets. So if we look at all of our expenses and divide them between program and admin, where program is defined as serving the parishes of Vermont, I estimated that about 70% of our spend goes toward that. And that's really subjective. It means looking at my time. It means looking at, using the bishop as an example. I think I made the assumption that 80% of her time serves the diocese and the mission that we publish, and 20% of her time is running this office. And so there's some subjectivity to it, but it's a good mindset to approach, as long as you don't take it too far. Sometimes in nonprofits, the pressure on a nonprofit to have program spend gets in the way of growth and things like that. But I think it should be a metric that we continue to think about year over year. What are we doing for the the parishes and the congregations that that we serve, and as we'll see in, I believe, the next slide or two, that are the big piece of the income for this diocese. So I'll move on. The operating income sources, that blue section is unrestricted income, and most of that is mission support from the congregations, the assessments that are annual assessments. There's about a 4% increase over 2023. The orange slice is our investment income, which includes both restricted and unrestricted. And that represents 20% of our operating income, and then miscellaneous income. Most of that is the Hunt Trust grant of about $125,000 that we have historically been awarded year after year. Next slide, please. Our non-operating income sources, most of this is also from restricted investments. The grants and loans comes from our grants and loans investments and is used to award grants to parishes. The budget calls for a bishop's appeal in 2024. We haven't had that since, I believe, 2021. And I know that was a question in the last year's pre-convention. Other non-operating donations, various other investments. But just to give you a sense of where the money is coming from. Next slide, please. And now I'd like to walk through the detailed budget. And if you've seen this already on the website, or you've heard me in a prior standing committee or commission on finance, this will be a bit repetitive. I hope you can read this pretty well. I'm going to refer to a hard copy in front of me. The top section is our operating income, and it's a bit what we just talked about. It's our unrestricted income, mainly parish assessments. There's a small buffer for uncollectible accounts. The collection rate within this diocese is phenomenal, the history of it. Our investment income, and just as a piece of information, our general investment policy here at the diocese is that we pull off 5% of our investments each year for restricted usage, and our principal gets protected as long as we're earning at least 5% per year on that principal, so that we would end the year with the same principal balance and that these investments go to serve the diocese for years and years to come. The miscellaneous income we talked about is the Hunt grant. Within the expenses, there were two lines that kind of pop off this as being significantly higher than 2023. One we talked about with formation and mission, and the second was non-employee. Our personnel staff, our actual staff of the diocese is seeing a reduction in personnel. Our non-employee is seeing a significant increase. It's a little misleading in that the CFO line item was funded through some restricted funds in 2023, and the CFO role is budgeted at slightly fewer hours in 2024 as 2023. But this diocese is making a necessary effort to really get a handle on the finances of this diocese. And the big piece of that is understanding our restricted cash. We have internally restricted cash, donor restricted cash, reserve accounts. And, it's probably best used as an example is probably best illustrates when we have instances like this summer where there are multiple parishes that are suffering flooding. We gather and talk about how can we help these parishes. We need to know at any given time what our resources here are without having to peel back the different layers. We have in that specific example, we have a disaster relief fund. And so we looked back at that and found the balance, and we have Bishop's discretionary. And so it takes, what we ideally will get to is really understanding those balances well enough so that it's just fast. We know what we have. We know what our resources are. Also in that non-employee line is we have contracted with an HR consultant through June of next year, but it's budgeted for 12 months of next year to help us with our manual, with our policies, with our review process, with our onboarding, offboarding, everything that an HR department would typically do. And that has been done a bit on a shoestring budget here by folks who that's not their job. And it's not what they're trained in, but it's bringing it up to a level that we've been missing here at the diocese for too long. The other lines on here, some of this is very straightforward. The administrative, the audit, the insurance, the bank fees, things that we can't do. They're fixed costs. The bishop's house is an expensive line, and we're addressing that. I think I included the note that of that nearly 30,000 that gets spent on the bishop's house each year, over half of that is utilities because it's the HVAC system, but that'll be replaced in the spring. We were hoping for the fall, but supply chain got in the way. Other areas on here are pretty standard year over year. The other operating expense line at the end is where we include, and this was a part of last year too, but I'm highlighting it for this budget. If everything we want to do this year, if we're measuring that through our expenses, are $91,000 higher than the 2024 income that will come in. So the cash in next year, as budgeted, will be $91,000 less than the cash out next year as we spend it. And we will be able to do that through use of some of our restricted funds that we already have. That includes our audit reserve. Some of these reserve accounts have sat for a long time, and it's time to use them for our operating expenses. Our audit reserve, we have a miscellaneous budget reserve, our greatest need. And so that is what is in our operating budget. Our non-operating budget, which is not the next slide, but 2 down, is a lot simpler. The income that comes in includes what we pull off our grants. And again, it's that 5% of our current balances. Technically, it comes in each quarter at 1.25, which makes up our 5% for the year. We award those, we anticipate that we will award 100,000 in grants for 2024, which aligns with what we'll pull off. The discretionary income, pretty similar to what we saw in 2023. Overall, our budget is 6% higher than 2023. It again represents that we're trying to do a little bit more in 2024 versus 2023. When I think about the risks and opportunities with this budget, I feel like it falls into the right spot of being realistic, maybe a little bit aggressive. I think the biggest opportunity in 2024 will be from unforeseen income, which, every year there's something you don't see coming. There's always some sort of funds. And in the budget narrative, we spoke about the funds that come from the sale of closed parishes and really working to make sure that those funds are used for the betterment the diocese as a whole across Vermont, and for our future. Um, the risk, I think the biggest risk in this budget is that we are a lean staff here in the diocesan office. We are, I'm familiar with the nonprofit mentality of all hands on deck, and it is alive and well in this diocese. And I think that is probably our biggest risk for 2024. Let's move to the next slide, please. And then I'm going to add one more to this list. When we think about, and I didn't repeat in these slides what I mentioned in the treasurer's report about what we've accomplished as a diocese since the introduction of Thrive 2 years ago. But I'll do a little bit here. What I really enjoyed going back and seeing is 2 years ago, we had a strategic document that said we want to do, and there was a offshoot of Thrive where a group came together and said, here are the financial recommendations we're making for this diocese. And in the 2 years since, we've been ticking off the list, not in entirety, but the creation of the Commission on Finance, which was a more efficient structure than had been in place. The move to ACS, our new accounting software, and Realm, which is our new database software, it has been, it's always a difficult year when an organization adopts new software, especially software that's, challenging software is rewarding, but it's challenging. This is not QuickBooks Online. ACS is a system designed to help us track all of our restricted funds, things that a simple system cannot handle. And it has taken time, as expected, for this diocese to get used to that software, and we still work to get the most out of it. We have a lot more work to do to get what we want to get out of Realm. Realm is our database software where we should be able to go in and pick off whatever group of people across the diocese, across the state that we want, whether it's all the wardens, all the priests, we should be able to do that. And we need better trust in that data, and we're working on it. These 3 items here, reducing our reliance on our external auditors. We shouldn't be relying on our external auditors to book transactional activity. We will book our own investment activity. Again, I mentioned we'll do that for 2023 once 2022 is final. Looking again at our internal controls to ensure we have our proper checks and balances in place. Who can approve what spend? Does one particular role or a couple have too much, I don't mean authority, but there should be checks and balances in place so that the person who processes payroll doesn't approve payroll. And those checks and balances we need to clean up a bit. And the third one, and this was definitely in the Thrive document, is to continue to use the data that we receive here at the diocese in the parochial reports and the annual reports to better understand how the parishes are doing. And to put that most bluntly, we want to know that there's a problem before it reaches a dire state. Knowing that there is a cash flow problem at a parish 6 months in advance of that becoming a dire scenario is manageable when it's we want to get on top of that a little bit more. The last thing that I didn't have on this list is to look at the reporting that gets done. We will always have our balance sheet, our P&L, a cash forecast, but to look at that reporting think about the metrics that we as a diocese, what are the fiscal metrics for success of this diocese? What do we want to, how do we want to judge success? Is it our cash reserve? Is it, there are financial and non-financial metrics, but it's an oft maybe used, a phrase used too much, but putting together that dashboard, something that we can look at each month, be familiar with, the format becomes familiar, and just start seeing those numbers each month and becoming more and more familiar with where we're at. That may, I hope I didn't run through all that too fast, but that's my report from the budget for 2024.
Thank you, Michael. I do wonder if there are any questions to pose. I see some hands.
Our first hand comes from I'm not sure which Presler is going to be asking the question, but from the Zoom window named TL and TH Presler.
Thank you so much, Mike, for that great presentation. Very, very helpful. I have two questions. One is I'm glad to see the total of the investment, the total of the investments. I've always wondered what that total amount was. It seems to be about 9.6 million, some of which is restricted, some of which is most of which is restricted, some of it is unrestricted. And I was wondering whether you could just give us just a quick snapshot of just examples of what kind of restrictions there are on those funds, just so that we would all be aware of that. My second question is, I noticed that there are only $2,000 for seminarian support, and that seems just unconscionably low in terms of seminary costs and the kind of support we need to provide for those who are preparing for ordination. So I was wondering if there are any other sources for supporting seminarians.
I'll answer your first question about the restricted funds. One example is our McClure funds, which are restricted funds that the dollars we pull off each year are temporary. The principle of that investment is permanently restricted. The 5% that we pull off each year is temporarily restricted and used for grants to parishes. So in that 9.9 million includes, and I think the balance, I don't have the balance in front of me, but the balance of that investment is a pretty clean example of where we have restricted funds. The question on seminarian support came up when we spoke to the standing committee, and I will happily defer to others on this, but the answer in that meeting was, we don't have, if there is a need, we'll find the funds. We want to support, we want to support those efforts. There isn't my memory of that meeting coming out of it was that we don't have the candidates right now, I don't believe. But I'll happily let Bishop Shannon or others chime in if there's a better answer to that.
I'll just quickly add that since I've been here and also with Bishop Tom, there's always been supplementation from the bishop's discretionary account to help seminarians, and it's expected and continues to happen.
The Bishop's Fund is another investment account that we pull off of each year, and we don't specifically budget much usage of that in our 2024 budget. So that also serves as a bit of it shouldn't be a safety net. It shouldn't be used to pay because we can't pay our electric bill. It should be used for better things than that for the diocese, but it is a bit of a safety net for us in that we aren't budgeting usage of it.
All right, our next question and hand raised is Lizette Baxter.
Yes, thank you, Mike. It was a good presentation. I was wondering, last year included, we always had something for Rock Point Common. I don't, or unless I missed it, but I didn't see anything on the budget this year.
It is in there, and it is in our non-operating total, and it includes Rock Point receives annually in recent years $80,000 total from this diocese, and these numbers may shift. The 80 won't shift for 2024, but that is broken down into two very different pieces. As currently budgeted, 40,000 for Rock Point is to the Commons, and the Commons reflects the shared lands that the diocesan office, the Rock Point School, and Rock Point Center share. I forget whether it's 130 acres or 180, but the property here in Burlington. That's our share of keeping this property livable. The 40,000 towards Rock Point Center is mission support towards their efforts. Rock Point Center is charged with figuring out how they can become a sustainable operation without mission support from this diocese, and they are taking giant steps forward in 2024 through a developing deal with Burlington School District to house the alternative high school for Burlington High School at Rock Point Center. This program has been at Rock Point for a couple of years. It will be expanded to include both. The BSD Alternative High School has two programs, Horizons, and I'm blanking on the other name, but they will both be housed at Burlington.
On
top. Thank you. The great part about this deal for the diocese is that Burlington High School, or the city of Burlington, is going to invest $3 to $4 million, probably about $4 million, into the infrastructure of Rock Point. And for all these buildings they're not crumbling, but there's problems every month. And so we will come out of this with some beautiful structures down there that are consistent with the historical design of the buildings, but new HVAC, new windows. It's going to be a little bit bigger. The price that Rock Point will pay for this is that we are signing at least a 15-year lease with Burlington School District for them to house their program here. And what that means for Rock Point and the tranquil environment of Rock Point remains to be seen a little bit, but there have been more conversations about that than the lease amount. So it is front and center. But in 2024, Rock Point Center is, assuming this deal happens, and it should, Rock Point Center is going to have a hard time generating other revenue because of all the dust and all the construction that's going to be happening. And so they need support next year, but we're on a really good path with Rock Point to have them be a sustainable operation in a few years. Kelly Kimball's been a magical hire as their ED.
Thank you.
All right, our next question, our hand raised, is from Beth Mapes.
Beth, did you have a question? You'll have to unmute.
Why was the local option priesthood program deleted.
I'm not sure I understand the local option priesthood program. I'm not familiar with that.
Well, there's a person in our parish. We're a very small parish. And she's done all the coursework that was required. And then suddenly, last week, she's told, well, this has gone by. We're not going to do it. She's been studying. And she's been preaching in St. Dunstan's. Very well, I might add. And I was once married to a
I put the
congregational
electronic
minister.
also.
No, but suddenly she's told last week, oh, this isn't an option. And that was when she said, this is what I'm doing. Telling them what courses she's been taking.
I will say that
absolutely-
Mike doesn't have an answer for that because it's not a budget question. And I see that.
I think it is, because it's ministry development.
Titus Pressler is the chairperson, one of the chairpersons of the Committee on Ministry, and I saw that he was about to respond to that question, so I will let him continue.
Okay.
Thank you very much for that question, Beth Mapes. I'm somewhat familiar, though only recently became familiar with the particular case you're talking about. But in general, let me say this. The local ministry support team was an effort that developed over the course of about 20 years. A lot of effort went into it from the previous Bishop of Vermont and from the Commission on Ministry over the course of several chairs. A number of people devoted a great deal of time and effort to it, and that needs to be honored. At the same time, it became clear over time that the local ministry support team approach was very difficult to implement. Implementation tended to be inconsistent. Candidates were often confused as to requirements. It was difficult for the commission to stay on top of all of the elements of the local ministry support team process. And then we received a new bishop in Vermont. We elected a new bishop of Vermont, and Bishop Shannon came in and examined the situation, consulted with the Commission on Ministry, and her inclination was, this does not seem to be working, and it probably needs to be discontinued. What do you think? And we on the Commission on Ministry agreed with her. This is very important for everyone to realize. We on the Commission on Ministry agreed with her. And those who were in the process came forward for ordination and were ordained. And the process has been, that whole approach to ordination has been discontinued. And I, as the chair of the Commission on Ministry, Committee on Ministry now, feel that we're in a better place and that the diocese is fully as flexible enough to deal with people's individual situations. And I think we're just moving forward. It was a great experiment. It produced some successes. It was difficult to implement, and that's where we are as of this time.
Beth, I see your hand is still raised. Do you have another question?
Yes. So St. Dunstan's is basically out in the cold.
Beth, this is a question that I think you and I could have a conversation about, and that we, the whole parish of St. Dunstan's or worshiping community, I should say, because you all are not bound by a building. But this is a conversation that we can continue outside of this particular meeting.
Okay, when?
Please send me an email, and Kathy Teresi will set up a time for us to talk.
Okay.
Great. Are there other questions on the budget for Mike Shapiro? See no other questions. We can move on then to another part of our business that will be central to the work we do on Thursday at the business session, which is resolutions. And for that, I'd like to invite Ann Brown, the chair of the Resolutions Committee, to report out what we can expect.
Thank you, Paul. We have 8 resolutions for consideration at next week's business session. Tonight, I'll just give you brief introductions for each one. I hope you've checked them all out on the website. In some cases, I'll ask their contact person to offer some brief remarks. And then you'll have an opportunity to ask questions of those people. If you have questions that might require some significant time and that may not necessarily benefit everybody on the Zoom call, I suggest that you communicate directly with the contact people listed at the top of each resolution, so you're sure you're clear about their intent before next week's business session. I'm going to present the resolutions next week in a more formal way, and there'll be an opportunity for debate under our rules of order. Tonight is a little bit more relaxed. I'm going to present them in the order that they will appear next week, and then we'll consider the first 4 that you're going to see tonight in one chunk. There'll be some other business of convention, and then we'll consider the last 4. So the first resolution proposes revisions to the canons. At last year's convention, we revised the canons to reflect recommendations of the Thrive Commission. And we recognized then that living into those changes would likely lead to some additional changes this year. So what you have here is the actual resolution itself, and then the full set of constitution and canons for the diocese. You need that because there are several little changes to go along with the big ones throughout the document, and you'll be able to see those. When you look through it, you'll see them marked, as you can see on the, you'll be able to see it on the screen. But I'm going to invite Tom Little, who's our diocesan chancellor, to provide any additional explanation and to respond to questions.
Thank you, Ann. Good evening, all again. The Thrive effort that went on over a year and a half, among other things, sought to make our church governance in the diocese more agile, efficient, and stronger through a collaborative process of, and this term sometimes gets overused, but I think it applies here, reimagining how to work together to do the ministry of the church through governance. We knew that we might not get it perfect the first time, and last year at convention, the convention included in the canon changes a 3-year sunset, so that absent any further action by convention, those changes will dissolve and go out of existence after 3 years. But it also was intended to keep us focused on those changes and be alert for issues that needed to be resolved. And we, in fact, learned that we had some serious unintended consequences. That's from my career in the legislature. That's one of the things that we all try to avoid, but we know that we will never eliminate unintended consequences. The process that we took to address this unintended consequence, and that consequence was that the bishop's leadership role and voting role in the work that was formerly done by the diocesan council had been deleted as part of this mix of governance changes. And through a process that was that mirrored what we did in Thrive, which was inclusive, involving the Canons Committee, Bishop Shannon, the Standing Committee, and the expanded Standing Committee, the trustees of the Diocese of Vermont, and other canonical bodies affected by the canons. We reached a broad consensus to restore that leadership role and voting role to by creating a sort of maybe a modern version of the diocesan council, but not exactly the same, to be called the executive council. The canon changes propose how the membership of the executive council would be made through ex officio members who themselves are elected by convention for their other roles, and through up to 3 appointments by the bishop in consultation with the executive council members. I think that this also would continue within the 3-year sunset, keeping us honest and continuing to look at how these governance changes are working. And I fully expect that in a convention next year, we may find some other things that need adjusting or tweaking. The resolution that's on your screen also directs the Canons Committee to undertake a thorough review of the canons and look for other areas that can be improved or clarified. These changes, if adopted at the business session next week, would take effect immediately upon adjournment of convention. And Brown, I will pause there and see if there are any questions, and I'm available offline if anyone wants to take a really deep dive into some of the nuances of the language in the proposal. But it comes to you as a recommended resolution from the Canons Committee itself. And we came to unanimous agreement on it, and it has the support of the canonical bodies and the officers of the diocese who participated in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I have one little bitty question at the bottom of the last resolve. Should that be 2024 diocesan convention? I missed it in reviewing the thing.
Let me.
It's talking about where the Canons Committee is asked to undertake a thorough review and propose appropriate revisions for consideration and action. And I think I missed when I reviewed your resolution, so that everybody here knows, is that 2024 convention?
Yes, good.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a typo.
Okay, we'll fix that.
We're not going to be ready by next Thursday.
No, especially since you won't even be authorized to do it. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions on that particular resolution for canonical change?
Lizette Baxter has her hand raised.
Yeah, I just am trying to really understand. With this change, that mean it becomes very top heavy. There's no check and balance. You know, when we had the council and standing committee, but now it's only one. There's no check and balance.
No, what we did last year, Lizette, was to we added additional advisory members to the standing committee itself. So you had the core membership of the standing committee plus some additional members who were advisory and non-voting, who represented the budget process, finances, and so forth. And the vision for that was that would be a more effective and successful way of doing the business end of the work between diocesan conventions. And we've struggled in Vermont for decades over a thriving and strong diocesan council, trying to find people to serve on it and so forth. And as you'll recall, we had we tried 3 or 4, at least in my tenure as chancellor, 3 or 4 different ways to rejuvenate diocesan council. This was a way of doing it a bit more fundamentally. This year's proposal is to keep the core standing committee exactly the way it always has been. That function of the standing committee, which is required by the Episcopal Church canons. Every diocese must have a standing committee with certain fundamentally important responsibilities, including when the office of bishop is vacant, to serve as the ecclesiastical authority. That will continue. And what I would call the business and finance related responsibilities will be taken out of the expanded standing committee, moved over to a new executive council. And so that does not, we still continue to have a standing committee with its role in being having advice and counsel with the bishop and its other canonical roles, including acting on requests from other dioceses when they elect a bishop and so forth. Is that responsive, Lizette?
Yeah, that helps. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's still the check and balance in you know. Yeah. Yeah, that's good because, yeah, thank you.
All right, our next hand is from Lee Crawford.
And just, I mean, it's almost like having the executive committee of diocesan council without diocesan council, because we used to have an executive committee that would plan things before the diocesan council would meet. And it also met more frequently than diocesan council. So that's sort of how I'm looking at this.
Our next raised hand is from Carol Wageman.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Lizette, for raising that, because I had the same question. Well, my question was, as I was going through it this afternoon, was, well, what was the role of the standing committee last year before the change was made? And so I couldn't really get a sense of what they all had been and what they became, and then what would they now be? Because there were so many changes in there of the wording. I was concerned that it almost felt like I'm sure it isn't, but it was like, is the standing committee's authority being gutted somehow? And that's Tom, I really appreciate your words, because it sounds like they're returning to the role that they've always had. I just want to be concerned that is true, that is what will take place.
Yeah, yes, and in fact, the traditional role of the standing committee continued over the last year. That never really changed. This was an add-on, something bolted onto it in this effort to discern and try out a different way of doing what I call business and of the work of the church between conventions.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm glad the bishop will have a group that will be a different level of support for the work that she does. I think that's important.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank
Looks
you.
like we're ready to move on to the next resolution, and this we've really already heard about. This is the adoption of the fiscal year 2024 budget. It proposes a balanced budget, and it also, you will note, the second resolve proposes a method for determining congregational contributions to the operating budget. I think Mike Shapiro has given a very clear explanation of the budget itself, but he is available if anyone has questions about the resolution that will be adopted.
We have a raised hand from Carol Widgman.
Thanks. Mike, is this the tiers that are presented, are they the same as what they are now? Have they changed? I know there's been, changes made to the tiers that are charged to congregations over the years. And I'm wondering, does this change for any of the congregations?
No change. It is the same system as 2023. And
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Yes.
Good, thank you.
Okay, no more hands. The next resolution we call Resolution 3. It recommends a cost of living adjustment for clergy and other employees of the diocese and of congregations. And it recommends a change in how employers fund employee health insurance premiums. And this is a little complicated. It's new this year and it's a one-year thing, but I think we have Ken and Linda Grentz to respond to questions and to give us a little bit stronger explanation than I have.
Thanks, Anne. And I am your diocesan transition ministry consultant and meet with the compensation committee, which recommended this to the diocesan standing committee, which approved it. So the resolution actually comes with the approval of the standing committee as they reviewed it. It contains three primary factors in there. One is the usual cost of living increase, COLA, and the number that we chose was 3.5%. We normally go along the line with what the Social Security recommends, but we are ahead of the Social Security announcement. We saw it was going to get to be 3 point something. We picked 3.5 because that helps the math when we're doing the insurance piece, which I will explain in just a minute. So that's where that number comes from. Two recommendations that are new. One is to eliminate the clergy copay, where the clergy pays a percentage of the insurance premium back to the congregation. The problem with doing it the way we're currently doing it is that the congregation pays the increase, and then the priest turns around and pays back to the congregation some money to cover the cost of the premium. But the increased income the priest gets is taxable. So they lose 25% of that to the IRS, and the amount that the congregation has to pay for the pension is 18% of whatever that COLA is. So we're suggesting moving the base down by eliminating that passing money back and forth and just have the parish pay the full insurance amount, and in exchange for that, the priest will get 3.5% less. So this is for the married couples. So where they were paying the parish 3.5% of the premium, they will not get the 3.5% COLA. So it comes out that neither, it doesn't change the numbers for either the priest or the congregation. The same amount of money is going, it's just that you're saving the taxes to the IRS and you're saving the money that you're paying for the pension fund. And then going forward, there will be COLAs and there will be other recommendations out of future compensation committees. But this adjusts the base down in 1 year and then continue that. Some of our newer clergy have already negotiated that. They're coming from other dioceses. Part of the rationale of that is saving that money, but the other piece is, frankly, in a very tight clergy shortage situation, we need to be more competitive. And I'm talking now as your transition minister. It's hard to get clergy to look favorably on coming to Vermont if they then have to pay part of the money that goes to the insurance. So part of that is also making us a more attractive. So that's one piece. It's complicated. It's recommended, not required. We are building that into the letters of agreement for people who are coming in. Some of you may want to take time, and you may not want to do it all in 1 year. This is something that you want to discuss between the clergy and the congregation. The third recommendation is that some of our clergy are on their insurance of their spouse, or they come to the congregation and already have a insurance, let's say, because they were a vet, for example, and they're on the governmental healthcare program. And so the parish goes, oh, goody, so we just saved $20,000 or $30,000 that we don't have to pay in health insurance. But unfortunately, the clergy person generally has to pay, that family generally has to pay some portion of the premium that the spouse, for example, is getting from their employer. And frankly, we have one of the best insurance programs that there is. And so their co-payments are probably higher. Their prescription costs are probably higher. So it actually means that it's not fair to the clergy who are on their spouse's insurance or who have insurance from the government or some other source. If we don't provide some subsidy, there's no, we haven't said, this is what you must pay. We're encouraging you to have a conversation between clergy and congregation so that you find out. So how much is what is the clergy person having to pay? And you may just provide a subsidy that is taxable and pensionable. So there are costs to that beyond the actual dollar amount. But to be fair, to provide those clergy with some additional income that goes towards their health insurance. It is not taxable if they ask to have it put into a 403B tax-free in retirement fund. So that is another option. And I will say this is confusing, A, and B, it's important to have conversations and to negotiate these things as opposed to this is the rule and you just follow it blindly. There are some cases where it would not be advantageous for a clergy person to make this change. For example, if you are in your last 7 years and you want to get the highest compensation so you get the best pension, then you want to keep as much money as you can in salary. If you're below that age-wise, then you're better off moving as much money into benefits as you can. So I'm available to both wardens or vestries or clergy, anybody who needs some help in terms of trying to figure out what's fair, how do we do this, how might we phase this in over time, or do we do this all at once? Please feel free to call on me for help with that. So I'll pause and take questions.
Linda, what would we need to set aside to really be attractive to young clergy here in Vermont? Would it be $50,000, $100,000 of a kitty to supplement salaries from various parishes?
We actually have built into this year's budget some mini grants for constellations. As we move into constellations and create these full-time positions, there will be some transition costs that I think the diocese will need to help. Congregations generally get more financially stable and grow when they have good leadership, good clergy leadership in place that is stable. And so that's part of what the strategy is we want to strengthen our congregation. So we want to bring clergy in. I'd love to have a pot though. If you are you fundraising one for us to use? Whoop, you muted yourself. David, you muted yourself.
Okay. What we need to consider is what it would cost to attract 3 or 4 younger clergy to the diocese that could be considered for the constellation process. That would be, and is it? I don't know what the number is. You're the manager of this thing. Would we need $100,000? Would we need $50,000? And should we see that as an objective?
I personally think it would be good to have somewhere in the $40,000-$50,000 range on the diocesan budget to help with transitions. So that, for example, if a constellation gets together and needs help for a while. Yes, Greta is saying, can we stop saying young? And we're trying to say newer clergy, clergy who are new to the diocese. But we need help for congregations more so than help for clergy. We need help for congregations who may not all be able to move immediately to providing what is an attractive package for clergy.
Thank you.
Our next question comes from Beth Mapes.
How are you, Beth?
Okay. I spent a number of years in a congregational parsonage. And I provided the health insurance from the phone company. It was pretty good. When we moved to Connecticut to a new parish, of course, I didn't have that health insurance. And there was some where, frankly, I would have been better off dying in the emergency room. I think that you need to really have a better health insurance for the clergy. Because if you get sick and you don't really have health insurance, see what happens in the ER. Thanks.
Thanks, Beth. And thank you for reminding me. The one other rationale that the compensation committee raised was the importance of congregations to be paying something towards health insurance so they don't get shocked by the jump from, oh, we got lucky and don't have to pay anything, to, oh my God, we've got to pay $30,000 a year. So moving in that direction and having that as a line item in congregational budgets also helps with the sticker shock.
Yeah.
I was looking in the chat and I don't quite, Francis Hussey says, since when is the law that part-time employees are to be covered fully with health insurance? Part-time employees, all of the things go proportionally. So they do get some assistance, but not full health insurance. Unless they negotiate for that. I mean, if they would choose, and that's why I'm saying this is a negotiation thing. If it's better for your family and you're a part-time priest and it's better for your family to have the congregation cover your full health insurance and reduce your salary by that amount, because that reduces your taxes and that, just works better. You get coverage that Beth was just talking about. And that's something you can negotiate. These are recommendations. I keep reminding people, the minimums are the requirements. A lot of the rest of these things are recommendations. So you negotiate. And it's going to be different from one congregation and one clergy person to the next. This is not a one size fits all. Other questions?
Yes, our next hand is from Kim Hardy.
Ask Kim.
Hi, Linda, thanks for the presentation and to the team who's worked on this. I have 4 questions that I would like the team to consider, if it would, because I don't think all of this is clear for everyone in the diocese. I see my parishioner Francis has started to weigh in. Thank you. Francis. Here's the first question. If the team could write them down and maybe think about these for a little bit of clarification on the resolution. 1, I'm curious, this doesn't have to be in the resolution, but I'm curious how many clergy percentage-wise in our diocese this affects. I wrote that in the chat. Because I've been here about 7 years, and was never the case in the letter of agreement of sharing costs. It probably was in the letter of agreement that, like, if you were half-time, the parish would cover half the cost, but there was never this percentage of agreement. So maybe that's something new. The second question is, for those who decide to take the health insurance instead of a cost of living increase, does that mean they'll never get a cost of living increase if they do that every year? That's question 2. Question 3, I don't think applies to many in our diocese, but it certainly applies to Fred and me. Our parishes have shared the cost of one coverage for our family since we got here. So there's already a cost sharing for our parishes. He has been full-time and I have been half-time. So I'm wondering how that fits into the resolution, because I see nothing about that. And my 4th question is for those of us, thank you, Greta, who are still active, but not as young. We are beginning to share even more cost of health insurance with the parishes by taking Part A of Medicare, which is allowed, and that lowers the cost for our parishes, even if we still have to have children on our policy. So I think I know those are like specifics. I don't know whether they relate to anybody else other than me, but I suspect they may. And as our clergy force in Vermont gets older, some of us, I think they're, important to consider. So I know this resolution is complicated already, but I think there are some things in it that it just does not cover.
There are lots of things that it doesn't cover, and it also, I'll just tell you my personal opinion right now. I think we need a guide for how to do compensation packages as opposed to passing resolutions that have lots of detail in them. The canons require a diocese to establish the minimum compensation. And the rest of this stuff is all negotiable, the kinds of things that you raised. And your situation is different, but the question is what's fair in your setting? And we should, look at that. And both you and the congregation should be comfortable with whatever it is you agree to. I don't know when the shared premium cost came into being. Maybe somebody else knows that. The answer to that, I will say that you would get COLAs in the future. This just brings down the base in this 1 year. And then, of course, because you brought it down, the base means that the parish also benefits in going forward. So you're building your COLAs now on a 1 year lower base. And remember, the chart that you're looking at is for new hired clergy. So
if we
the thing that you're describing is, so if you had a letter of agreement, Kim, you may have put the letter of agreement together before that 3.5% in your parish and you never changed it.
That's true. I just
Linda and Kim, I'd like to break in here a little bit. Since this is a discussion that refers specifically to one situation, perhaps you can do this in another forum, as in when I suggested that people with specific concerns deal directly with a person who's the contact person on the resolution. This might be a great place to do that. Also, one question I know you asked, though, that I think Linda could answer is what happens with the COLA going forward. It's my understanding. And also be mindful that the next resolution is the clergy compensation, minimum clergy compensation resolution that we normally do every year. So this one comes before it because it has an effect on it, but it's not the whole ball of wax. So I just wanted to throw that in, so because we have a whole bunch of people on here.
So I appreciate that, Anne. I just want to have clarity for my vestry. That's all.
Makes sense.
Yep. And that's why I said, I think if you need clarity, let's have conversations. I mean, I'm happy to help with that, and I do that, especially with new clergy, but I'm happy to help anybody who's updating their letter of agreement or wants help with negotiations.
Thank you.
And I see Ken, are you next?
Becky, I think, is next.
No, Becky is next.
Yeah.
No,
yes,
Becky is next.
Collette
Sorry,
is next.
Oh,
hi everybody. I have a question back to the one about the an allotment of money to help bringing in new priests to our diocese. And I was wondering what that was envisioned as. I mean, my mind went to back when we were looking for computer specialists in different areas, and they'd get like signing bonuses, something to lure them in to see how wonderful it is to learn to live in Vermont. And I was wondering how you foresaw that being enacted.
If we had extra money, the place where we need it is for, if we've got 2 or 3 congregations going together to create a full-time position, they often are short a few $1,000s that would make that package more attractive. It's not extra money to go to the priest. Vermont is actually attractive to clergy. We don't have to worry about that. People love the idea of moving to Vermont.
Uh-huh.
It's we just need to be competitive on the salary and benefit level.
Absolutely. Thank you. That answered it perfectly.
Yeah. Sophie, I'm going to let you, you're keeping track of who's next.
Yes, Ken McFarland has his hand raised, and so he would be next.
Yes, thank you very much. I just put a message up on chat, and this is actually my first experience with this particular forum, but I've had a lot of experience at running meetings, and I feel like that, without being overly critical, that there's a lot of going into the weeds, a popular expression now here, that probably, if there's another forum that this could be directed to rather than involving everybody in on this meeting, that would be much appreciated. There were some things that I wanted to address later on in the agenda, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make it. And so, you know, please, as whoever is actually running this meeting, please consider the fact that some questions, while they all have validity, they don't necessarily pertain to everybody in the meeting, and that they don't necessarily need to go on at such great length as they have over the last 30 minutes. And so I'm not sure I'm going to make it to the end, but just to make that point, the main purpose of any meeting is to bring it to a close at a proper time. And so please keep that in mind, my friends, as we proceed. Thank you.
Point well taken. You know, to keep our questions particularly focused on the resolutions and the questions at hand, and hopefully not go into the weeds. And as Anne has suggested, as we move through these resolutions, if you want to seek out further information or clarity on any point that might be particular to you, you can always go to the sponsors of the resolutions that are noted at the top of those resolutions as another vehicle to get further clarity or information. Sophie?
Yes, Beth has her hand raised again. Do you have another question, Beth?
So why was the local option priesthood deleted?
Beth, that's not a question specific to the matter at hand right now. And we've talked about that once before this evening, and the bishop has said she would address that with you personally. So that falls into the category of other discussion, not pertinent to the issue at hand.
Okay. Okay.
Our next raised hand is from Judy.
I agree that this meeting goes on and I'm getting lost sometimes. But I'm grateful for all of the questions. This is my first time being a delegate, and I need to understand this budget process and the resolutions. So although it's long, and for some of you, it's 6th grade knowledge, for me, some of this is 2nd grade knowledge. And so I just want you to know that I appreciate all of the questions, and I'm making notes for things that I need to have explained to me further, but that I will do with the resolution person later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Judy. So I think our next resolution is the one that we do every year, required by the canons. It's called Establishing Minimum Clergy Compensation, and it includes some of the elements in the explanation that were in the previous resolution, because they are kind of linked. But this one does what the usual clergy compensation resolution does. One thing that it does have in it is a section about the COLA, which, as Kim asked, I believe, would that mean it would go away? No, it's there. And then it's to be dealt with however the recommendations invite a congregation to do. So I'll turn this over to Linda if she has further explanation about this one.
I'm just saying one quick note, and that is if the convention votes in favor of the resolution about insurance, then this would apply to new people coming in. If they choose not to go that direction and say, no, we just want to do the 3.5%, because the finance office didn't add the 3.5% onto this chart, I'm actually going to ask Rich to put together another chart that has the 3.5, just in case the insurance resolution isn't passed. Then we ought to actually pass this with the updated numbers. It's a little confusing to know which way to do that. It's a chicken and egg question. So,
and the third resolve does have 3.5% COLA in it, and it does refer back to the other resolution. But if the other resolution doesn't pass, then this is obviously there. So it's a way of saying it's not going to go away if we don't pass the other resolution.
Yeah, right.
Jane Lolax has her hand raised for a question.
Thank you. So are these like recommended reimbursements, compensation, or could a particular parish choose to pay more or less?
You can always pay more. These are the minimums that are required. So,
Thank you.
and it's the minimum is these dollar amounts, and then $500 a year times the number of years of experience. So that's how you calculate where you fall on the scale.
Thank you. That answers it perfectly.
Other questions on the minimums? And can we move on to resolution 4?
That was resolution 4. We want, whoops, this one skipped one. So I'll skip.
Sorry, Anne, which one are you looking for?
That's okay. I'm looking for the Anglican Communion one. That was supposed
okay. Sorry about that. There we go.
Okay, so this resolution addresses the concerns for equity and support for LGBTQIA persons in the Anglican Communion. It recommends engagement and active work for change, particularly on the part of the bishops of the Episcopal Church. It identifies conditions that could lead to their refusal to participate in official Lambeth Conference bodies. And it also includes a provision for withholding the Episcopal Church's contribution to a portion of the Anglican Communion budget, so long as a resolution from the '98 Lambeth Conference regarding sexuality remains normative. Now, at last year's convention, a resolution titled Distancing the Episcopal Church from the Anglican Communion was presented. And as part of the discussion on that, a proposed substitute resolution was offered. And the discussion on both of those was ultimately tabled pending further discussions to take place between that year's convention and this one. Deacon Stan Baker was very involved in putting this together, and he's unfortunately not able to be with us tonight. So he sent me a couple of notes to read instead of what he might have said. He reported that there were 3 discussions over the course of the year. In the first one, participants viewed a video called Voices of Africa, a documentary. It's about the plight of LGBTQ plus Anglicans in Africa. And they heard from the one of the documentarians, Katie Sherrod, I believe. The second discussion was titled The Bishop's View, and it focused on the experience of 3 Episcopal bishops at Lambeth. And they were Thomas Brown of Maine, Dion Johnson of Missouri, and a reading of a statement from our own bishop, Shannon McBain Brown. And then there was a final discussion that addressed the 2 resolutions together and what a revised resolution would look like. So a draft went around and received comments from many people, and after several versions, the current resolution was submitted for consideration by convention. And note that what you see on your screen, the very first resolve says that the Convention of the Diocese of Vermont submit the following resolution to the 81st General Convention. That means that if we approve this, it will be sent to the General Convention for consideration by the whole church at its meeting in Louisville in June of 2024. It will be taken up there by a legislative committee, which will look at it along with other similar resolutions, and I expect there may well be some. The committee may amend it and or combine it with others and send a final version with their recommendations to the appropriate House of General Convention for consideration. So that's what the course of this will be if it is adopted. I went into that long explanation because it was one that we had some significant discussion about last year, and so it's come back, and this is the form in which it's come back. The Very Reverend Greta Getline is available on this Zoom call. If you have any questions, she can answer them, or you can email Stan Baker, whose name is listed as the contact person at the top of the resolution.
Sophie, it looks like there is one question.
Yes. Ken McFarland has his hand raised. Ken, you are still muted.
I am so sorry. Yeah, I think it is very important to flesh out acronyms. If you're going to use an acronym, just say what it is. So tell me what that acronym fully, I do know, but there's an ending to it I don't know. So what does that acronym mean?
Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, and asexual, I believe, is what it means.
And I will agree completely to that. But I have an additional group that I feel like that this particular gathering emphasizes, and that relates to ageism, something I encounter so frequently. And I'm not sure why that, maybe that factors into something else, another resolution by the diocese. But I just yesterday, I'm so, it's oftentimes delivered in a very subtle and sweet way, but it just is, it's something that I feel like that we all need to think about. We need to think about it with each other. And the person who actually gave me this insult, and she didn't think it was an insult, was probably in her almost 70. And so I just want to point that out as another group that we should be thinking about as part of our concern about discrimination within our community. So just to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you. It is not particularly relevant to this resolution for the simple reason that this one is dealing with issues in the Anglican Communion and official stances the communion has taken. They may well exhibit some of those same problems, and we can deal with that in a separate resolution, but this one is focused on this one particular problem. Last year, it was more specific about the fact that the Lambeth Conference did not invite the spouses of lesbian and gay bishops to Lambeth. And so we're trying to get at some of that and make a stronger stand. But I'll let Greta address that if she would like.
I would very much appreciate that. Thank you.
I don't know that there's anything to address. I think that those are separate issues. This resolution is dealing with a very specific thing that happened at Lambeth and a very specific statement that they have made repeatedly around gay people, queer people. And so I think your concern is a valid one, Ken, and I would encourage you and whoever else might be interested in that to get together between this convention and the next and to look at that issue and craft a resolution should you so desire to.
Yeah, I will so desire to, and I think that it's something. As I look around this Zoom, I think we're all subjected to it, and we all need to be reminded of it. And so I will certainly move forward on that. But I'm also totally supportive of this resolution, exclusive of the ages in question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Not seeing any other questions. Oh, there is another question. Sophie, right?
Jim Ballard has his hand raised.
I understand the Archbishop of Canterbury basically agrees with this. Is that my understanding? So he may be with us?
Not yet.
Any other questions on this particular resolution? Not seeing any. I think, Anne, we can move on to the next.
Okay, and this one comes from the vestry of the Church of Good Shepherd in Barry and it's asking that we as a convention send a letter to our congressional delegation and the governor requesting their action on the problem of gun violence. And if Linda Webster is here, I would invite her to explain it, as she, I believe, was one of the chief sponsors at Good Shepherd.
Yes, thank you, Anne. And good evening, Bishop Shannon and brothers and sisters in Christ. I'm Linda Webster, Senior Warden of the Church of the Good Shepherd in Barry. I speak to you tonight regarding a resolution brought forth by the vestry of Good Shepherd for your support in appealing to local and federal Vermont elected officials to work toward ending gun violence. In April of this year, following the Nashville school shooting, the vestry, in concert with our congregation, wanted to take direct action in asking our leaders to address 3 specific measures which strongly contribute to the frequency and lethality of mass shootings. They are banning assault weapons, passing the 2023 Background Check Expansion Act, and increasing funding for mental health care. The vestry passed the motion for such, and we implemented this action on Mother's Day. Of course, at that time, we didn't know about the mass shooting that would later occur with our neighbors in Lewiston, Maine. We quickly became aware last week that one of the victims was a family member of a parishioner at Good Shepherd. Overall, I know this hit close to home for all of us, and we are looking to clearly reinforce the urgency of strong advocacy to stop these senseless tragedies. The resolution brought forth this evening is to ask this convention of the Episcopal Diocese of Vermont to also lend support to this advocacy effort by joining and sending the letter noted in the resolution to identified local and federal Vermont leaders. And we thank you for your consideration regarding this crucial matter.
Thank you.
Are there any questions?
I'm not seeing any hands raised. Thank you very much, Linda.
Thank you.
Our next resolution, and we have just 2 more, so Be patient. We're
Um,
getting there.
Anne, I see a hand is raised. I would like to double check that this is a question for the upcoming resolution and not the one we just discussed. Gain Murphy?
You need to unmute yourself.
I'm unmuted. It was a question for the one we just did, and it took me a minute to hand. My question about the resolution is for the woman who was just presenting was, did you guys also consider adding to your 3 actions the coordination of data? My understanding is there's a huge problem with even understanding gun violence and what's efficacious and what's not, and there's been a deliberate effort to make that quite difficult. So I'm just throwing that out and asking if that was part of your discussion as well.
We did a lot of research on data and based our choice of the 3 actions that we're suggesting based on that. But looking at the efficacy, the overall coordination of data, we did not do that. We used the data from very reliable sources and found that these were the top 3 areas that we felt would be most immediately impactful.
Okay. No, I wasn't challenging your data at all. I'm actually really grateful that you put an action instead of thoughts and prayers, which is kind of a perversion of prayer. It was more a question of, did you look at, I've heard there should be a federal agency that tracks all these things. There should be like a mind bank. So somebody's actually in charge of understanding it. I just wondered if that came up in your research as an efficacious action, as a 4th action.
Yeah, it wasn't one that we chose to do, but there are some resources out there like the Gun Violent Archives that continue to look at tracking the number of school shootings, the number of mass shootings, the percent within our country of casualties compared to other countries. So there is a good resource for that. And like I said, we just pulled information from that to kind of focus on the ones that we hoped would have the most impact and the quickest impact.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, moving on to our resolution number 7 is a resolution that comes from the Jubilee Social Justice at St. Paul's Cathedral. And the contact person for that is Sylvia Knight. And I would invite her to give a brief explanation of her resolution. There's plenty of stuff in the explanation that you can look at to refer to.
Okay. Hello?
Yep, we hear you.
I'm Sylvia Knight, St. Paul's Jubilee Justice Coalition Committee, rather. And I have worked on pesticide issues for some almost 30 years in Vermont, looking at peer-reviewed research on the pesticides, their dangers, effects on humans and the earth, on life. And I see that since 2010, every year, about 1 million pounds of pesticides have been used in Vermont. And unfortunately, we're seeing that some pesticides are now contaminated with the forever chemicals called PFAS, which are persistent, bioaccumulative, and toxic compounds at extremely low concentrations. And it's crucial that we work together to reduce the use of these toxins. If we care about God's creation and the survival of life and our vitality. So I put a number of reasons, a number of, some glimpses, some pieces of research in the notes. I was astounded to find that the law that had been passed in 1970 asking for pesticide reduction had been repealed by the legislature in 2021, I think it was, at the bidding of one of our state agencies that has to do with regulating pesticides, which seems to me a conflict of interest. So I'm asking us all to do what we can to reduce and not use pesticides. And I'm part of a grassroots network in Vermont that has taken on the challenge to reduce and to try to reduce pesticides, help encourage others to reduce pesticides in the state. So I hope that our diocese can go on record of doing, of reducing pesticides. And the church, the national church passed a resolution to this effect in 20 years ago. So I look forward to seeing what we can do with this at our convention.
Thank you, Linda.
Do you have any questions?
Ken McFarland has his hand raised.
Yes.
Okay, and if the diocese approves this, and I think very worthwhile resolution, is there funds to join with other organizations to hire counsel to approach the legislature to challenge this change that's been made? Or do we just simply pass a resolution that will go to Montpelier and probably go nowhere?
No.
I don't think there's time to answer that question. So I'm just raising that as a possibility. Is there no? I withdraw my question, except to say that if you're not prepared to come forth with more than just a resolution, I'm not sure exactly where it's going to go. But if you can help join with groups
to speak to that,
our lawyers to take this to the General Assembly, then maybe, or to the legislature, then maybe you might get somewhere with it. And that's all. Thank you.
One of the things that we're asking the convention to do is to communicate with our congressional delegation, because there is legislation at the congressional level dealing with pesticides. And yes, it would be valuable to consider taking this issue to the Vermont legislature. But there are reasons why we haven't. It's a worthwhile question. Yes, Ken, appreciate that. And we could talk about that privately.
Yes.
As to why we haven't included that.
I do understand.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. So we have one more resolution. It is Resolution 8. It will appear last when we gather next week, as it is now, but it's not least. It is asking us to support the Vermont Declaration of Inclusion, and it's included in the resolution. It's sponsored again by the Vestry of the Church of Good Shepherd Barry, and the Reverend Earl Cooper Camp, I believe, is available to speak to it.
Yeah, so thank you, Ann, and good evening, my sisters and brothers. And I promise I will be short and sweet. Good Shepherd, almost 20 years ago, was one of the founding congregations of Vermont Interfaith Action, and Vermont Interfaith Action has become a partner in the Vermont Declaration of Inclusion, trying to, at this point, believe it or not, because life moves on, since we put this resolution into the diocesan process with 121 towns. That's now been increased by 5, and now it's 126 towns, representing just a tad under 72% of the population of Vermont have signed on to this resolution. So by encouraging this resolution, our diocese would become one of the supporting organizations within moving for the Vermont Declaration of Inclusion to be adopted by all the municipalities of our state. And I think it really does speak to what the mission of the church is about reconciliation. So I commend that to you, and I think I might even meet some of Mr. McFarland's problems with ageism as well, because it's talking about all of us being welcome. So I'd be pleased to entertain any questions you have about this.
Thank you, Earl.
We have a hand raised from Titus Pressler.
You're muted, Titus.
I've been involved in preparing an initiative for the Declaration of Inclusion in the town of Montgomery. And just a couple of points of information. One is I've been in touch with Al Wakefield, one of the originators of the Declaration. And he assures folks that you don't have to copy the exact words of the Declaration, just so long as the general intent includes all the particulars. And secondly, it is often the case that select boards are asked to endorse the Declaration. And in my view, that is fairly ineffective in terms of the life of a town. What we're planning on in Montgomery, which I would suggest to folks, is to have an open town meeting, an open town conversation, and gather input into it, maybe make some revisions, whatever the case may be, and then take it to the annual town meeting. That's our plan in Montgomery, so that it's owned by the preponderance of the people of the town, rather than simply by the select board. I very much support this resolution.
And McFarland has his hand raised.
Yes, and I had no intention of being this involved. But I'll have to say on behalf of St. Thomas and Grace in Brandon, beginning after the death of George Floyd, and now every first Sunday of each month, we have a silent vigil on the lawn of St. Thomas and Grace. And the way that we designate it is for social anti-racism and for social justice. But I think that given my points I've made, we'll have to add ageism as well. But I'm so proud. I mean, we've been dedicated to this ministry, and I hope that you've all been doing the same. And it's been very meaningful. Who knows what success we've had, but we've certainly given it the old college try. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. And that concludes my little section. Just remember that it will be helpful in terms of the business session, which is liable to last longer than this one has, that we get our questions answered ahead of time and try to minimize the amount of debate, and that debate on resolutions stick to the topics of the resolutions themselves. And I look forward to seeing all of you next week. And if you have any questions of me, My email, I believe, is on the website, along with all as the chair of the resolutions committee, and I'm sure that other members of the committee will be happy to help out. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne, for running us through the resolutions and having opportunity to discuss them more fully. There are just a few additional items for us this evening to cover. One would be a report on the nominations process, both the slate of nominees for various elected offices and the process by which someone may enter a nomination from the floor of convention. So I would like to call upon Pamela Vandegraft, the chair of the nominations committee, to just run us through those nominations and the elections that we have ahead of us. Pamela?
Sorry.
There you are.
Yes,
Great.
here I am. Thank you, Paul. Hello, everyone. So nominees from the floor may submit their nominations forms in advance. We're trying to facilitate the business meeting moving on. So information will be shared via the Zoom chat at convention. And moving on. So first up is Brookhaven. We have 4 nominees. Normally there's only 3 positions available, but they happen to have 4 this year. So you can see those names there: Judith Castonguay, Sally Garman, Luke Kruger, and Teresa Voorhees. For Commission on Finance, we actually still could take 2 more people, but we're doing okay with it. One clergy nominee is the Reverend Melanie Coombs, and one lay nominee is Rebecca Boucher. General Convention, last convention elected our deputies. These are our alternate deputies. They would take the place if somebody elected last year could not go. We have 4 clergy nominees: Jenny Anderson, Walter Brownridge, Earl Cooper Camp, and Amy Spagna. And we have 1 lay nominee, Lisa Leopold. We have room for 3 more lay nominees. We will be voting for 1 clergy nominee when you vote next Thursday at the business meeting. And that is just so that we have a ranking in case one of them goes. We have somebody who's in first to go, somebody who's in second to go. And next. So for the Provincial Synod, we have 1 lay nominee, Nancy Gordon. Rock Point Board Commons. So we have 2 nominees so far, the Reverend Charles Nichols and Elizabeth Ferries, and we have room for 1 more nominee if somebody's nominated from the floor. Rock Point School Board of Trustees, we have 4 nominees. You can see their names here. There will be 1 more nominee probably coming up, and you can see that those nominations are being finalized, and there will be an addendum to the nominations booklet. Standing committee. So every year we elect 1 lay person and 1 clergy person to standing committee for a term of 4 years. However, this year is going to be a little different in that we have some unexpired terms to fill. But starting with the clergy nomination, there is 1 clergy nomination to vote on. There's 3 nominees: the Reverend Rachel Field, the Reverend Canon Dr. Robert Leopold, and the Reverend Dr. Frederick Mosier. So we will be voting on that at the business section. And you can certainly go to our diocesan website and read what each of these people have written about why they want to be part of the standing committee to help in your decision making. We have 4 lay nominees: Wallace Good, Nancy Gordon, Catherine Merrihew, and Judith Rogers. One of those people will be elected to fill the 4-year term. And then there's an unexpired term of 2 years and an unexpired term of 1 year to fill. Next, trustees of the diocese. So we have one clergy nominee, the Reverend David Frederickson, and 2 lay nominees, Noma Anderson and David Bullock. David Bullock is re-upping, and Noma Anderson is interested in the 2-year term that is available. We have room for a few more trustees. So if somebody wanted to self-nominate from the floor or knows somebody who would like to be self-nominated, that would be great. And I believe that that is all for the nominees.
Looks
And
like we have a question.
We have a question. Jane Lolex has her hand raised.
Jane, you're muted.
Thank you. With all due respect to Canon Brownridge, I thought I had heard that he was leaving the diocese. So I guess I was a little surprised to see his name up for election. Maybe it said he's still staying another year. I was just confused by that.
Yes, that's a good question. Canon Brownridge, would you like to address that?
I'm leaving the bishop's staff, but I'm still staying in Vermont.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? I see.
I have one more while I still have the floor. Thinking ahead, I sense that we're closing up here pretty soon. Thinking ahead to next week, will it be the same Zoom address as tonight's was, or will we be sent new Zoom addresses?
I can speak to that in the next part, Jane.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Beth's hand is raised and she is next. Beth, do you have a question about nominations?
Oh, I need a new computer.
Yeah, what's that supposed to mean?
Could you clarify, Beth? A question about the nominations?
Is it charging?
I'm reacting to Jane's comment.
Yeah.
Anything further?
So I think Jane was questioning if Canon Brownridge was still going to be around if he were to serve as an alternate deputy. And the answer was yes, he is staying in Vermont.
Right. So can we move on to the next questioner?
Yes, the next question is, excuse me, the next hand raised is Natalie Wallace Good. Natalie and Wallace Good, I believe. Oh.
They
point of information. The Rock Point Commons Board has one open slot for election at this. There are 3 slots elected, one for each year, 3-year terms. So there's actually only one term open, not 3. There are appointments that the bishop can make that are also open.
Thank you, Ollie. I think we'll check that out. Double check that. Any other questions?
On nominations.
On nominations, yes.
Jane, I see your hand is raised again. Do you have another question regarding nominations?
Yes, a clarification. So Canon Brownridge is leaving the bishop's office, but remaining in Vermont. So
Yes, that's what
therefore,
he said.
okay, so therefore the position he's going for is not necessarily coming from the diocese.
Correct. He was
Thank you.
just putting his name forward as a clergy nominee.
Okay, that's what I was missing. Thank you, one and all.
Yes.
I will shut up now.
Any other questions related to the nomination process or nominees? Not seeing any, which means we can probably turn things over to Kathleen Moore, who will give us just a little bit of further instruction to prepare us for what is coming next on voting procedure and addressing questions like logging into the business session.
That's right. Just a little bit. And Jane, don't shut up too much because it was a really good question. You will all, as registered clergy and lay delegates, be receiving another Zoom link for the business session. We do it this way because we think it would be really confusing if we sent them both at the same time. So it will be a different link and it will be sent later so as not to confuse the two. So look out for that in your email. Okay, Carol, is this a question specifically about the Zoom link?
Yes.
Okay, go for it.
I never got it. I called the diocese office to try to clarify why I'd never received anything. Look,
are you subscribed to the Mountain newsletter of the Diocese of Vermont?
Well, no, and maybe I am. I guess I am. I did go out to the Mountain newsletter and found it.
That's where it was. You got it.
Well, then we didn't get it by email then.
That's an email.
You didn't get it to this meeting. No one did. It all came through the email of the.
Okay, well,
I'm not trying to be cute with you, but especially if you're a delegate to convention, please pay attention to any email from the Diocese of Vermont, including the Mountain, because it often has really important information.
Well, I didn't get that one either. I looked everywhere for it. I used to get them. I don't know what's happened. Anyway, I was able to backtrack and find it. So now I know it's going to be there again. I'll be fine.
Nope, it's a different link. So what we're going to do, so it's going to be a different link coming to you. So I'm going to take down your name because I want to make sure in the back of our system that you are getting emails from the Diocese of Vermont. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Sellers did this for me.
Sure. Great.
But nothing changed actually. So that's great. Okay. Thank you very much. Don't want to miss it.
No problem. Okay. So again, this year, we're going to have two kinds of voting, right? So we're going to have what's called a Zoom poll. We use that for really sort of simple, almost pro forma kind of things. My favorite one is sort of when we want to decide that the meeting's over, things like that. It's a really easy way, a faster way to get things done. Then we're going to use Election Buddy, which is our really secure system. And so that ensures that only registered lay and clergy delegates are voting in these really, really important votes. So what I want to do, I'm going to talk more about Election Buddy next, but I want to start out, so you guys are pros at this, but you folks are pros at this, but I want to start out by launching a little bit of a test Zoom poll and let's see how we do. So you're going to see something pop up on your screen here. Don't flick it away because we're used to flicking away pop-ups, but this one we want to keep. Good job. It's a hard one. You can abstain. Don't worry. Oh, nice. Y'all are doing great. Oh. We are at 90%. Can we get higher? 91. Anyone else want to vote? Coffee or tea? It's an important question. All right, I'll take 91%. Or yeah, 91% voted. So 66% of you prefer coffee, 28% of you prefer tea, and 6% of you abstain. So you have that important information about the Diocese of Vermont. I will take questions about that. Craig Hammond.
I'm my husband Craig and I'm Liz Vick. We're both delegates.
Yes.
But we share a Zoom thing in his name. So can we, I mean, I assume we should both be able to vote, right?
Yes. So there are two answers to that. Ideally, if you have separate machines, it would be great to do it that way. However, that is why Election Buddy is so important. We're not going to be voting on resolutions. We're not going to be electing people using Zoom. It's more for these sort of procedural items that get us through the evening. But just, it would be great if you could find two different devices, or, one could go to church, one could stay home, something like that, but it's not entirely necessary. So usually these are the kinds of votes where it's like a resounding percentage of the convention, like 99% or more, are voting yes. So, Sylvia, you'll have to unmute yourself.
I'm not a voting delegate, so do I really need to do this section?
Oh, no, you are relieved of your duty, and we thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Bye, Sylvia.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Natalie and Wallace.
So no pop-up occurred for us. We have to allow pop-up windows on what device?
Maybe, what are you using?
And it's an Apple, so
like a
we have to
computer
allow
or
it
an
for
iPad.
Zoom. Is that what we're using here?
Yeah, this was Zoom. This was a Zoom poll. Are you using an iPad or a computer?
Computer.
Okay. Huh. That's odd that it didn't pop up.
Well, but they have to allow pop-ups for the site, so.
Probably so. Yeah. So look into that.
Okay.
And yeah, you could do a little experimenting, and because you got a week. So you could do a little searching because it really should come up. So, okay. Okay, cool. So we've got that pretty well settled. Next is Election Buddy. And this is the one that, again, it's really, it's sort of standard. It's been used for bishop elections now, completely secure. Nobody is going to know how you voted. That's really important to us. And nobody who is not authorized to vote will be allowed to vote. So I am going to share my screen here. I have to tell you, and a test vote went out I can't remember what day it was now. And 110 of you have been able to complete that test vote, which is amazing. So thank you so much for doing that. That just helps us know that you all sort of know what you're doing and you're set and you're ready to go. So just to go over it, the way that this works is that, nope, wrong share. Is that you should have all received by now an email from the Episcopal Diocese of Vermont from the email invitations@mail.electionbuddy.com. And the subject was Vote Now, the Episcopal Diocese of Vermont, that's a typo, 2023 voting credentials registration. Many of you have gone through this, so bear with me. If you have not opened that email, this is what it's going to look like. And the most important part of it is going to be down here at the bottom. There is a link, there is an access key, and there is a password. This information, the link is going to be the same for everyone, and it's going to be the same link we use during convention. The access key and password are unique to you. That's how we know that each voter is getting a vote. We issue you your credentials. When you click on that link from that email, you will get a screen that looks like this. You will see an orange button. Click on that button. You will enter your access key. So not your email address, your access key that was in that email, and your password that was also in that email. You will click Vote Now. And then you will have a choice. Will you attend the business session of Diocesan Convention on November 9th? We really hope you choose yes, because you have been issued credentials to vote. So hopefully you're going to choose yes. You're going to click continue. And then I do like this feature. It makes sure that that's what you wanted to click, but you have to make sure that you look at it, you say, yes, this is what I intended to say. And in order for your vote to be complete, you must hit this submit button. So you click submit, and then you'll see this screen that says next vote. Now, right now, when you click next vote, you're going to get this screen. And it says when meeting votes are live, the buttons to access the voting process will appear here. So of course, right now, there's not going to be a button for you to vote because you voted in the only vote that you need to for now. During the convention, as votes pop up, so say we're going to vote on Resolution 5, a button that says Resolution 5 will pop up, but only when it is time to vote on that. When it's not time to vote on anything, your screen will look like this. So we have a couple recommendations for Election Buddy. If you possibly can, we recommend being on Zoom here with us on your computer, if you have a computer, a desktop, a laptop computer. If you have a mobile device, like an iPad or a phone, we recommend using that for Election Buddy. The only reason for that is it just makes it so you don't have to juggle two things on your computer. So in order to do that, when you get your Election Buddy email, you would click on the link from your phone, and then you'd be all set because it would stay on that page for the entire election. On the day of convention, you will get another email that looks very similar to the one you already received, asking you to participate in one more test vote. It's going to be a silly question like cats and dogs. I have not decided what it is yet, but it will not be a question of consequence, I promise you. What that is designed to do is to get you to open that web page for Election Buddy and make sure that your credentials are logged in. What we ask you to do is stay on that web page because you're going to need it throughout convention to keep voting. So again, the URL, the address of the voting page in the browser on your phone or your computer never changes. It's that one URL the entire time. Your credentials, that access key and password, once you enter them, most internet browsers will actually hold on to them. So probably you're only going to have to enter them once and you'll be set. Last of all, remember, your credentials that you received in this first email stay the same. So you're never, if you've done it once, you can do it again. They are the same for this convention. I've had a couple of questions because those of you who voted last year went to the page and saw your old credentials entered, and of course they didn't work. We issued all new access codes and passwords this year just to make sure that we don't have, say, a voter from last year trying to get in. So I think that that's my introduction. I will say that the voting round for this sort of introductory credentials vote that went out will end at midnight tomorrow. And then we will do some reaching out to those of you who were not able to successfully vote in this round, because we want to make sure that all of you are comfortable with this system and know how to use it. And I got to tell you, last year you did great. And so I know, again, for those of you who are new, you're going to have a lot of help and support, and we're gonna do this well. We have some questions. Judy.
I'm sorry, I got a little confused with some of what you're saying. When is this email with our credentials and things for convention going to show up?
So it should have already showed up. We sent it, Sophie or Rebecca, I'm sorry, my week has been a little nuts. I cannot remember the day we sent it.
No, I got the one, I got the tester. I got the
great.
test one and I did that. What I'm saying is you're talking about, we're going to get another email
Understood. It is
with
confusing.
credentials for
Yep.
both the voting and this other thing.
Totally understand. So Judy, you're going to get first of all, thank you. You are all set. If you voted, those are your credentials. We like to send another one an hour before conventions, just so that, yeah, that's all it is. I'm so sorry for the confusion, just because people lose their emails. We just want you to have the web page and your credentials again an hour before convention.
Well,
That's
because you said, oh, well, put it, use your phone for the one and the
Right,
computer
right.
for the vote. And I'm saying, but if I put that in now, how is that, I
Sure.
can't
Yeah.
do that
However,
now.
whatever works for you, please do
Okay.
it that way. Cool.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Christine.
So Kathleen, when you say convention, do you mean the business meeting a week from tonight, or do you mean on the floor of the convention at the cathedral?
Yeah, I am not aware that y'all have to do any voting on Saturday. I think it's much more fun than that.
Okay. The second question is, if we submitted our credentials already, do we have to in the email that you send us before convention, will we
we would love for you to go ahead and click on that link and vote in that test again as well. I know it seems like overkill, but it just helps people get in the groove,
and that will send us
something fun.
The access code and the,
yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yep, of course. And Jane. You will have to unmute yourself.
I'm sorry. Is it possible that a ballot could contain more than one question at a time? Or is it likely to just be one question for each ballot?
See, Jane, that is another excellent question. It is in fact possible, and it will be the case this year, that there will be votes of a ballot. There will be ballots this year that have multiple questions. I don't think there's going to be a ballot with more than 3 questions. This is not entirely, we haven't entirely set the script out, but we want to make sure that we want this convention to go by the book and be fair. And we also don't want it to be any longer than it has to be. So we'll take you through it, but it should be really, really simple. It looks just the same. You get a screen and you've got 3 questions to answer and you answer them, and it just works exactly the same way. So that was a really good question.
Thank you.
Pam.
I was an alternate and I got switched to be the delegate, and I have not received my credentials.
Oh, okay. That's a really good question. So we'll want to, you'll want to check in with, I have not been up on, with Paul on sort of making sure people are credentialed.
Pam, are you the woman I spoke with just this evening?
Yes.
So I've just communicated that need to the folks who are behind all of the credentialing. So hopefully it'll be sorted out within the day or so.
Yes, my colleagues are fast, but not quite that fast because we've been on this Zoom. So
okay.
Yes,
Pam, I will do my best to send you your credentials tonight. You do not need to vote tonight, but I will do my best to send them tonight.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sophie. Lindsay. Lindsay, you'll have to unmute. Lindsay, if you can hear me, you'll have to unmute yourself.
I got all excited about my question. I want to be sure I have this right. You sent me an email, which I can see on my phone, and I'll get another one, right?
That's exactly right.
You prefer that I vote on the phone while I participate in the meeting on the computer?
We find that people have an easier time with that. Obviously it's up to you. It works perfectly on a computer or a phone, but it just lets you focus on the Zoom and this kind of, with having this as your voting machine, but it's entirely up to you.
Okay.
Yep.
Just before I registered, I thought I better check it again.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
Thank you.
Yes. Y'all are so ready. All right.
No other questions on voting process or procedure? Looks like we're good. Thank you, Kathleen. That was helpful, very helpful, to give us a primer on all of that. With that said, we have covered all of the ground that we need to cover for this evening's pre-convention meeting. And I'd like to be able to bring things to a close by asking our bishop, if she would, to offer us a closing prayer for our time together this evening.
Great. Thank you, Paul. God be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Ever-living God, whose will it is that all should come to you through your Son, Jesus Christ, inspire our witness to him, that all may know the power of his forgiveness and the hope of his resurrection, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. Thank you all.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. See you
Night.
Saturday.
Night.